Blacks, brown, bitches, listen up. We white men will stand our ground. My open letter to George Zimmerman. From David Richard Santis, 1751 Winona Boulevard, California 90027-3824. Dear George, I am an old, stroke-crippled white man. My dad, King Anand Santis, taught me that as a Norwegian, I was a member of the master race. I was 3 years old when my proud Viking father had to scream these words at my mom. My father cursed my mother for being 100% Icelandic. King reminded his wife that she was one of two dog races on this planet: Icelanders and the, quote, N-word, close quote, people. You can imagine the shame I have had about King's mother having been forced to raise a Negro child and being herself a dog race Icelander. But weep for me as being 3/4 Icelandic. Though I curse my mother's and father's jungle fever, I am grateful to be 1/4 Norwegian. I only mention this because obviously your father is German and your mother, who he mated with, is a dog race, quote, brownie, unquote. You and your brother will be forgiven, parent, or encouraged, close parent, by God if you murder your mother. I am just proud that I can pass as Norwegian, a member of the master race. As President Richard Milhous Nixon preached quietly to the Koch brothers, KKK, and John Birch Society's father, to keep the black back, the brown down, and the rich are guilty bitch, close quote. Nixon, by the way, is the father of the Republican Party resurrection. Nixon knew that Southern white Americans would flee to the Republican Party if President Lyndon Baines Johnson kept pushing the crap about blacks being equal to white humans. Nixon had the brains and the foresight to know that we master race, white Nordic Republicans, can politically hold on to the Confederate States and to the, quote, border states, close quote, just by fanning the white-hot flames of fear and loathing against the blacks and the browns. But only if we could humiliate white bitches into wage discrimination and education discrimination against blacks by keeping America in a constant state of the fear of world wars, yellow people, brown people, black people, Muslims, communists, socialists, Democrats. Nixon's, quote, Southern strategy, close quote, is working well to this day. But in my expert opinion, we have to rekindle our racist and sexist propaganda crusade in our homeland. We have to put whatever number of billions and billions of dollars it takes to, quote, number one, keep black, brown, and yellow housing areas broke and looking like, quote, hellscapes, close quote. 2, keep K to 12 grade schools funding, quote, quote, so black and brown children can walk through miles of dangerous ghetto streets. 3, teachers will have to be grossly underpaid. 4, school buildings will become ramshackle. 5, school libraries will become rare. 6, school books will be rationed. 7, school libraries will sell all of their books to raise money for toilet paper in some school bathrooms, and it serves the colored right. 8, school lunches will only be served to children who win the genetic lottery. 9, school guidance counselors' jobs will be held by convicted child molesters. Close parent. They will be banned in gated communities. Close parent. 10, students will be made not to do homework. And 12, white race hustlers and traitors on the Supreme Court will be impeached.
Call from cell
Dear white people, I am as deeply disappointed by our current crop of white people as you are. I blame the governor of Alabama, George Corley Wallace, for the start of white supremacy's decline in this, quote, bestest, goodest country in the whole world, close quote, as Sean Hannity, the white knight of Fox News, likes to say. Governor Wallace betrayed every white Republican and every white conservative in America when he got scared at the University of Alabama. Wallace was America's hero when he physically blocked the entry of blacks into that great racially segregated university. Wallace chickened out and stepped aside when confronted by only one giant federal attorney and a few platoons of Yankee federalized marshals. George Wallace, quote, cowardice, close quote, shamed white men and dates, as my friend would say, who's running for president. He has a problem with that. I don't, but I'll be nice here. Floodgates. Civil rights mongers like Reverend Martin Luther King attach themselves like blood-sucking ticks to racial equality and fair pay practice. Fanatics. It has gotten so bad in some areas of the Confederate States that black folks are openly refusing to step aside for white people. The good white citizens of the Confederate South have to pray like they have never prayed before. Whites just have to trust and believe in Almighty God and Speaker of the House of Representatives, John Boehner, like they never have before. Trust God's choice of John Boehner as Speaker. Satan is who made the hundreds and thousands of, quote, results, close quote, on Google under this terrible thing. John Boehner. Cocksucker. This is what they'll go to on the left. If every white Christian in America prays to Almighty God like they have never prayed before, God will perform a miracle. God will give us victory in, quote, the war of northern aggression, close quote. The South will rise again. Robert E. Lee is not dead. He is just plain possum. Postscript. George, I know that the political left wing has gone insane. All you did was introduce one innocent black child to Jesus. Things will get better. Just look at the bright side. You are the most famous mall cop in America and the most feared. Hang in there. Within a year, you could get your own television show on Fox News. But look at me, for example. I arranged trips to heaven for thousands of innocent Vietnamese children nearly 50 years ago. Like you, I carried the weight of my guilt on my ass. When I had my first strokes, doctors at Los Angeles County General Hospital had to weigh me with a truck scale. I was 518 pounds. Today, 19 years later, I am well under 400 svelte pounds. That is total proof that God loves me. Ignore the left-wing ranters. Keep your dial on Fox News. Listen to Glenn Beck. Scan the sky for black helicopters. Put your hand on your gun when you see a black child. As you so soulfully put it on Hannity, whatever happened is God's plan. As the Bible tells, not a single sparrow falls to the ground without being seen by God. I believe that God called you to lead black Americans back to Him. Look at all the black people all across America who called on God to save them from you, your brother and your so-called white Christians. The king of Fox News, Bill O'Reilly, is such a self-righteous, explosively and justifiably angry white comb-over collop. O'Reilly has a special love for the, quote, let's say, destitute and starving women and boys in the third and fourth worlds. Close quote. It just pisses him off that they are contemptuous of him, like his family is. Bill O'Reilly cannot, on air, sniff loudly enough to drown the constant torment of, quote, hearing, quote, even as thou hast done unto the least of these my children, so hast thou done it unto me. For God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them into perdition and bound them with chains of darkness. Close quote. God. O'Reilly knows that Satan wrote, verily I say unto thee, easier it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter unto heaven. Satan's anti-rich people for the Holy Bible. That's what that is. That verily I say unto thee, easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into heaven, is simply satanically imposed into the book of God. Satan's anti-rich people forgery in the Bible. That's one of them. Bill O'Reilly just can't understand that only racist white trash can listen to him. Parent, because Satan walks the earth, close parent. That's why only racist white trash can even listen to Bill O'Reilly. But thank God we've got plenty of racist white trash in this country. We've got an abundance. Bill is livid that liberal white, quote, race hustlers, close quote, are too prejudiced to understand that George Zimmerman's mercy killing of Trayvon Martin was, quote, stand your white male ground, close quote, and not a crime. Bill O'Reilly knows that white racism is God's command. Not even a sparrow falls to earth that God does not know of. It's God's plan, believe me. Bill O'Reilly knows that God himself cursed Noah's son, who was named Ham. God turned Ham black and cursed him. Fox News and Bill O'Reilly know that God's curse was that all of Ham's descendants forever would be black. Bill O'Reilly and God's network, Fox News, are special anointed followers of the Lord Jesus Christ. God has appointed Fox News and Bill O'Reilly to ignite the final race war and the end of time, and a return of Christ to judge the living and the dead, as it is written in the Holy Bible. We white people are the only ones on earth who are smart enough Christians to understand that Almighty God is telling us through, quote, prophets, close quote, like Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, Geraldo, Huckabee, Van Susteren, the Koch brothers, the NRA, and ALEC. Just the other day, a great end times prophet, U.S. Congressman Steve King, told Americans the truth when he said, for every Mexican baby that becomes a so-called, quote, dreamer, close quote, there are 100 Mexicans crossing into the United States who have calves the size of cantaloupes because they are drug mules who bring 75-pound bags of weed into this country. One of God's chosen, Monica Crowley, regularly excoriates, quote, white race hustlers, close quote, like the ones who claimed that the Germans once somehow discriminated against Jews. But even Monica does not fully know the mind of God. For example, Monica Crowley, parent, the good Nazi, close parent, said that the George Zimmerman jury was not racially biased against Trayvon Martin. Parent, well, please. Just among us white people, of course, the Trayvon Martin jury was biased. All Christians have to agree with God in cursing all black descendants of Noah's nasty son Ham, who was cursed for lifting up a tent flap to watch his parents having sex. As George Zimmerman confessed to God's oracle, Sean Hannity, it was God's will that he kill Trayvon Martin, quote, Perrin, to start the end times as we devote Southern Baptists believe, close Perrin. God's Jackie Gleason, quote, The George Zimmerman not guilty verdict was not one of a string of defeats for the left. It was an interruption of a string of victories for the left. All liberal whites are notorious race baiters. They treated George's mercy killing like it should be a crime. Close quote, Rush Limbaugh. As Rush Limbaugh also said, quote, now that the white jury has spoken, I feel like I have the right to use the, quote, N, close quote, word. Close quote. Postscript. Ask God in your prayers tonight to send MSNBC's Martin Bashir to hell for saying, quote, the sewer of absolute crap that is Fox News, close quote. Postscript. The unwashed colored and white liberals deny that Emmett Till is dead because he tried to swim carrying more stolen chains than he could handle. Postscript. Jesus is white. Get over it. Postscript. Rush Limbaugh, the great right whale of American talk radio, shouts his truth. Quote, A. Black people in America are not harmed by billionaires. B. Black people are not harmed by going to school in ghetto schools that must choose between toilet paper and books. C. Black people's kids are not harmed by a lack of school lunches. D. Black people are not harmed by their inability to get regular medical care. E. Black people are not harmed by white racism. F. Black people are not harmed by a lack of recreational travel to national parks, beaches, museums, live theater, good teachers, healthy food, libraries, parks, automobile transportation, decent clothing, and shoes. G. Black people are not harmed by racist, bigoted white American people. Fox News does not harm black people. Fox News loves black people in a prison industrial complex. No black people suffer because too damn many black girls are getting pregnant, in spite of God's Republicans who work like hell to deny black girls access to family planning facilities or sex education or to abortion clinics, prenatal medical care, good schools, or a living wage. Postscript. Fox News said amen. Postscript. Southern white preachers and their heaven-bound hooded honkies shouted hallelujah for the tracking, profiling, and murder of a black child. My final thoughts. The 1% of the top 1% of gifted Americans have race hatred, class hatred, gender hatred, LGBT hatred, religious hatred, nation hatred, education hatred, and a visceral hatred for common decency. In state after state, giants of the coal, oil, natural gas, timber, construction, shipping, and financial industries funded the passage of Stand Your Ground laws. Huge money was paid. The Republican Party and many elements of the Democratic Party were bought by the 1% of the top 1% of rich people in America. The KKK and Satan are still screaming amen. The trap was set, and in Florida, a sad sack hack, schmuck, Cape Crusader, hunted an innocent black youth named Trayvon Martin, whose fatal mistake was trying not to bring his stalker to his family's home. Trayvon was caught smuggling, and he was violating the recommendations of the National Rifle Association that every child faced with a stalker should shoot first and ask questions later. It is just common sense that every child stalked by brown or black should shoot when they see the eyes of the whites. I'm not sure I have that NRA advice exactly right, but if Trayvon had followed my advice, he would not have had his little brother's Skittles seized as evidence in a murder trial. But anyway, for every white man knows guns and ammunition are the cures to the mass murder of school children. Editor's notes. Mr. Sandus was gifted with a tremendous in the line of duty nearly 50 years ago. He gets confused. George, your lawyers know you lied. Your father knows you lied. Lawyers dissect lies for a living. Your mother knows you lied. Your brother knows that you lied. Your wife knows you lied. Your gross obesity bears silent witness to a murderer's torment. Release your beloved ones from your satanic co-conspiracy. George Zimmerman owned the truth that Trayvon Martin told. Quote, "You are a creepy ass cracker," close quote. We are not alone, George. Good Americans do not listen to race baiters like Reverend Al on MSNBC. Reverend Al race baited by asking, quote, "What other case can you show me? A case where police came to a scene where the killer is standing over the dead body, tells a story, and goes home," close quote. Well, I can only think of two. The death of a fruit vendor in Tunisia, parent, who started the Arab Spring, close parent. And my son loves Sandus in Los Angeles. God gives Glenn Beck the vision to bring about a race war, or the end of time, or at least the hell of a lot of profit for Fox News and himself from fearful white racism. Postscript. On the tragic date of July 26, 1948, Harry Simpson Truman started the collapse of America by integrating our military services. Satan smiled. Postscript. George Zimmerman, let your, quote, creepy ass cracker fly. Close quote. Postscript. George, sell, quote, creepy ass cracker home security franchises. Close quote. Include a recent photo of Rupert Murdoch on each sign. Postscript. Do ads for Nabisco, quote, the other white cracker, close quote. Postscript. George, with Paula Deen, co-write a creepy ass cracker. A. Include a Mitch McConnell turtle soup recipe. B. Include a wide stance butt roast from Idaho. Include a Louisiana dirty diaper senator stew. Postscript. George, you have nothing to feel sorry about. Your namesake, George Washington, was a slave owner who raped his slaves. Postscript. George, Alexander Hamilton, who wrote the, quote, bestest, goodest Constitution in the whole world, close quote, included blacks as 3/5 of human. Postscript. George, Abraham Lincoln sent a hell of a lot of blacks to heaven in a civil war. Typed by the one and only, the amazing, adorable, smart, and funny Princess Alicia, Dave's favorite granddaughter. That's true. Hello? Hello? What's up? Oh, Gago. Well, actually, my son got here and I'm back now. I'm recording. I'm doing recordings. So but you can come by, though. You can come by. You can come by. Okay? Yeah, sure. And now, switching topics. May 20, 2014. Department. We'll start again. Switching topics. May 20, 2014. David Richard Sanis. 1751 Winona Boulevard, Los Angeles, California 90027. From the Department of Veterans Affairs, 11,000 Wilshire Boulevard, Los Angeles, California 90027. A letter signed by M. Kwok, Veteran Service Center Manager. It says, "We are still processing your application for compensation. We apologize for the delay. By the way, that application for compensation went in on November 11th, 1996. 2010, I think, is many years later. 2014, that's many more years. I would have thought that it would head it out in 6 months. But it's taken so far today, from November 1996 through today's date in 2014, and a lot more but unknown number of days to go. It says, "We are still processing your compensation application. We apologize for the delay. You will be notified of processing. If you need to contact us, be sure to show the number and full name of the veteran. If your mailing address is different from that shown above, please advise us of your new mailing address. You should notify us immediately if any changes to your mailing address occur." Like when I die, way before I get an award from the VA, and because it's already been, as I mentioned again, November 11, 1996 through today's date. And today's date is actually June 25th, a Wednesday, 2014. That's a while. But they're working on it. You know they are. And that's the problem. I'll be dead before I get an award from the VA for this period of years from November 11, 1996 until May 2010, when they gave me a partial award of my claim. They gave me 100% disability and all that goes with that, and that's nice. But it doesn't bring back the money that they didn't pay me, and it doesn't pay for my children or my wife. Because, hey, they can't be in too much of a hurry to do these things. Veterans Administration. Yes. Hey, Tiffany. What's up? Of course. Huh? I'll see you when we get here. Yes. It'll be an hour, though, before it's ready. Okay? His stuff is being copied right now. All right. Love you, kid. Bye-bye, daughter. Yes, come in. Hello? No, come in.
You're not coming this
I'm
way?
filming him. I'll talk to you later. I'm making a film now.
Okay, sorry, Mr. David.
We'll start again. This is a letter that I received dated May 20, 2014, from the Department of Veterans Affairs, 11,000 Wilshire Boulevard, Los Angeles, California, 90024. To David Richard Sanis, 1751 Winona Boulevard, Los Angeles, California, 90027. It says, we are still processing your application for compensation. We apologize. Let me try that again. Start again. Totally. Start again. Department of Veterans Affairs, 11,000 Wilshire Boulevard, Los Angeles, California, 90024. A letter dated May 20th, 2014. To David Richard Sanis, 1751 Winona Boulevard, Los Angeles, California, 900. And this is appropriate. Payee number 00 DRNNE. It is payee 0. For compensation. We apologize for the delay. You will be notified when compensation processing is completed. If you need to contact us, be sure to show the file number and full name of the veteran. If your mailing address is different from that shown above, please advise us of your new mailing address. You should notify us immediately of any changes in your mailing address. Signed, M. Kwok, Veteran Service Manager. Veterans Administration. Please pay my butcher's bill. Kindly give me the earlier effective date award I paid for 47 years ago at Dak To, South Vietnam, to today. The salient facts. Number 1. As of June 1, 2014, not one of my children has been given medical care by the VA. 2. As of June 1, 2014, not one of my children has been given a dime for college by the VA. 3. As of June 1, 2014, I'm still awaiting for the VA to give my son, Sunlove Sanis, the medical care to prevent his death by suicide on April 7, 2009. I think an apology would be nice. 4. As of June 1, 2014, I am still awaiting for the VA to give me the thanks and the $2,673 a month that the VA owes me from November 1996 through June 1, 2011. Sincerely yours, David Richard Sanis, ER 56390129. TJ, my FBI alias, when I was an undercover bomber for this country after coming back from Vietnam. Deputy Chief of Station, Central Vietnam, my combat handle. Postscript. To my living children, if I die before I get my change of date, some measure of justice from the VA money, please forgive me. I did my best for justice for you and myself. Boo-boos in the line of duty. 2 rifle strikes, face and neck. Bayonet during hand-to-hand combat. Wound open of eye and orbit. Dr. John D. Attilio, Captain, United States Army Medical Corps. 2. Bayonet rifle strike in, quote, old infarcts in the left thalamus and left occipital lobes, close quote. 3. quote, bayonet rifle vivisection of my aforementioned, three, bayonet rifle vivisection of my forehead and right eye did leave me with insight and 2 traumatic brain injuries in the line of duty. 4. My calling in Phuket Air Base F-7 Phantoms slightly damaged. I got to start again, I'm sorry. 4. Quote, my calling in Phuket Air Base F-7 Phantom fighter bombers to save the lives of 65 to 75 ambushed American soldiers did cause bomb explosions that gave me constant ringing in my ears and until about 4:15 p.m. on August 16, 1996. One of my strokes took the sound away, but of course I'm considerably hard of hearing. 5. Those same F-7 Phantoms physically managed my right inner ear enough that I still have awkwardly timed episodes of damn scary vertigo. My most recent vertigo challenge was March 21, 2014. I thank the Los Angeles Fire Department, Hollywood Division. 6. Playing war, I broke my left ankle and my left big toe on another occasion. It right now is in terrible pain. And we're talking a lot of years later. 7. Quote, crash landing in a Huey-D helicopter at Quin Yon has given me the gift of subliminal knowledge that I have a tailbone. 8. My right knee has been damaged since the moment I leaped out of a totally fire-engulfed airplane on June 7, 1967. 9. 6. I pulled both shoulders out of their sockets. Under intense enemy fire, one of my bodyguards leaped onto a Huey helicopter's landing gear rail. Within about a second, I reached out and grabbed my sniper team member under both arms to pull him aboard. At that instant, the intense enemy fire caused the helicopter pilot to violently elevate and spin so he could engage the enemy with rockets. Instantly, both of my shoulders were pulled away from their sockets. I refused to drop him. Dr. Son S. Ahalawalia, MD, Clinical Chief of Orthopedic Surgery, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, confirmed this on August 2009, confirmed my nearly 50 years old wounds. 10. Note, I refused medical treatment which would have sent me to Hawaii or for surgery on both shoulders because I would have had to leave Vietnam as the Deputy Chief of Station for the National Security Agency. It was my duty to protect the men and equipment on over 50 communication centers spread across 40,000 square miles of a 67,000 square mile country we used to call South Vietnam. 11. I only abandoned my men and equipment on February 1, 1968, when post-traumatic stress and cold fear had me totally in their grasp. I came to Vietnam as an invincible warrior. I left Vietnam as a basket case. Now I am an old, battered basket. 12. Quote, 2,100 plus helicopter gunship and war wagon trips outside of American lines with 1 or 2 suicide bombs strapped to my chest has gifted me with an until death does us part, a PTSD boo-boo. Once it gave me a heat rash, I think. "13. I broke my leg a few days before I started boot camp at Fort Ord. It was just an ankle break. 14. Early in my first tour of duty in Vietnam, I spent all-night shift behind a 50 caliber machine gun on guard duty. I was so sick and exhausted, I had to stab my right thigh and play with it to stay awake to guard my unit. The good. To thank President Ronald Reagan for his agreement with Gorbachev, I bought him a painting by Kei Amici. The President arranged a meeting for me to formally present the painting to him. I had a last-minute conflict, so I gave up the Reagan film moment and aided a child. A lot of years later, I still aid that child sometimes. David Richard Sanis, outline of medical events. August 15, 1996. MRI of brain. USC, University of California. History. Right-sided motor and sensory weakness. 1. Impression. Ischemic changes are noted in the left thalamus, bilateral basal ganglia, and a right centrum femiosul, whatever. 2. Infarct in the left occipital lobe. 3. At least 2 cystic lesions are present in the posteromedial left temporal lobe, which could be ischemic in etiology or cystic, possibly neoplasm. Recommended a CT scan of the head for further evaluation. Signed, CZ, ZEE, MD, and A. Lee, LEE, MD, USC Medical Center. August 15, 1996. April 30, 2011. Gift to Mitt Romney. Legal rights to black matter motor invention. I offered him formally the rights to my invention, which will change the world from use of fossil fuels to use of fuels that are completely harmless energy from space itself that powers the universe. You can read about it on my blogs on the internet. Under Black Matter Motor, you can start there, or just my name, David Sanis. November 23, 2010. Medical record. David R. Sanis. Final diagnosis. Dementia, not otherwise specified. Well, I don't think that was eating too much porridge. I think that's from too many head traumas, causing too many brain traumas. So now my November 23, 2010 medical record says final diagnosis for David R. Sanis. Dementia, not otherwise specified. May 14, 1997. Rating decision. Entitlement to non-service connection. Pension. Decision. Entitlement to pension is granted. That's when I could have started getting a pension. 100%. But it wasn't the truth. It relied on my DD-214 file, which didn't indicate that I was a top secret agent of the National Security Agency the entire time I was in Vietnam. And the entire time I was in the Army after I left basic training at Fort Ord in 1966. Quote, entitlement to non-service connected disability pension is effective 10/1. Actually 10/11. Different lights give me different problems trying to read. That is November 11th, 1996. Date of receipt of claim by the VA. 100%. But for the wrong reasons. I sent them their check back when I got it. Tens and tens of thousands, because it was not what I earned, so it wasn't going to be what I took. May 28th, 1997. Pension grant by the VA. Starting November 1, 1996. $687 a month for non-service connected disability pension. Original award. Starting December 1, 1996. $707 a month at that point. But I turned that down because it wasn't the truth. As I told him from the beginning, that after I completed basic training at Fort Ord, I was picked up by the National Security Agency and trained as a counterintelligence agent, and served 3 tours in Vietnam as Deputy Chief of Station for the National Security Agency on 2/3 of the country. In other words, I was the go-to guy protecting the communications of the country. And that wasn't because I was a village idiot. Although, I did volunteer 3 times for Vietnam duty. So that's can be debated. And the other side would probably win. June 20, 1997. VA letter. David Sanis had asked for a reevaluation of all pension checks because my pension was granted on May 14, 1997 with a false conclusion that I was a 72B40, a code equipment operator, not the National Security Agency Deputy Chief of Station for the 40,000 square miles of a 67,000 mile square country. South Vietnam. August 31, 1998. Rating decision. Service connection for post-traumatic stress disorder is granted. August 31, 1998. Okay, fine. It's granted. With an evaluation of 10%. Effective October 11, 1996. Quote, issue. Service connection for post-traumatic stress disorder. Close quote. Quote, the veteran does not have any of the qualification combat stressors medals. That's true. I don't have the medals that time, but they didn't really look. I had been given them. 12. However, as this surfaced only in 1996, it looks and sounds like a rationalization a rationalization after the event. A bipolar disorder is much more likely to an account of this type of behavior than any guilt due to Vietnam. The bipolar disorder is as read to fulfill his schemes of helping others. Well, finally, October 24, 1997. From the United States Armed Services Center for Research of Unit Records, USAC CRUR, 7798 Cissna, CISSNA Road, Suite 101, Springfield, Virginia, 22150-3197. Quote, well, the veteran was in the Army 7/26/65 to 7/4/1968. He was attached to the National Security Agency and was involved in communications security. Veteran stated that he was involved in directing bombing drops from B-52s and B-47s in an area which would have disturbed communications equipment. And could have killed the men operating it. One of my bodyguards, who was my bodyguard for a little over a year in Vietnam, Arthur Belmont Osborne III, an amazingly tough son of a bitch, has written to the people at the VA, and I would like to read his letter. I had one bodyguard for 2 years. That was Arthur Trangmar, and I had Arthur Belmont Osborne III for, I believe it was 14 months or something. But I'll read it. I arrived in South Vietnam. This is Arthur Belmont Osborne III, and I get his address, phone number. The VA, they've never called. I arrived in South Vietnam on September 15, 1966. I departed from South Vietnam July 13, 1968. I enlisted in the United States Army on October 10, 1965, shortly after my 17th birthday. I enlisted because I wanted to fight for my country. I volunteered for Vietnam. When I arrived in Quy Nhon, I was assigned to Company B, 41st Signal Battalion. From September 1966 until November 1966, I worked as a driver and bodyguard for the company commander of Company B, who was Walter S. Kulbaki, by the way, retired as a full colonel. And he's available for the VA to call. But that would be too simple and too honest. But anyway, back to the reading. Quote, on my first day in Quy Nhon, I was flown in a Huey helicopter a little halfway, over half the way up to the top of Vung Chua Mountain. My job was to unload electronic communications equipment and safeguard it until a squad of soldiers walked down from the top of Quy Nhon's highest mountain to carry the equipment back to the top of the 6,000-foot plus mountain. The top half of the mountain was blanketed in fog. I was alone and scared, but I did my job. I was not shot at, and no shots of combat on my way. came my way. In early November 1966, my life changed dramatically. One evening, another soldier and I were ordered to drive a deuce-and-a-half truck to the U.S. Air Force. We were ordered to load the truck with bags of cement and to bring them back to Company B. We drove to Phuket and loaded the sacks of cement and were stopped going out the gate by the Air Force Phuket police. We were arrested by the Air Force police, pending court-martial for theft of the truck, the sacks of cement, and all of our weapons. I refused to talk to the police. We were jailed until the middle of the next day when Captain Walter S. Kobaki, commanding officer of Company B, 41st Signal Battalion, drove us back to our base. We were out of trouble. When I got back to Company B, many people told me thanks for not talking. The cement wasn't for their benefit. It was for building slabs on top of the sand on the shore of the ocean at Quy Nhon, so they could be out of the water when there were high tide events. When I got back to Company B, many people told me thanks for not talking. U.S. Army Sergeant Major Maroney, who had ordered me to get the bags of cement, thanked me, as did Captain Kobaki. Other soldiers told me the reason that we were free and not in any trouble any longer was that another soldier in Company B, a Specialist 4, E4 enlisted man, David Richard Sanis, had gone into Lieutenant Colonel Stringfellow's headquarters and demanded the commander of the 41st Signal Battalion, which had like 7,000 men involved at the time, spread across 2/3 of the United States portion of Vietnam, which we call the. But to do that again, I have a problem with memory. It can happen when you take a couple bayonet blows in the head and rifles attached. But David Richard Sanis had gone in Lieutenant Colonel Stringfellow's headquarters and demanded the commander of the 41st Signal Battalion offer to get me and my partner in crime freed by trading refrigeration equipment with the U.S. Air Force General in charge of the Phuket base. Stringfellow refused, and Sanis told him he had 1 hour to change his mind and make a deal with the Air Force General. Sanis told Stringfellow that he would not make such a deal to free me and the other soldier. He would kill Stringfellow, and nothing on earth could save Stringfellow. Sanis then walked out of the gate of the compound and into the city of Quy Nhon. Within 20 minutes after the meeting, Stringfellow ordered every vehicle in the base to crisscross Quy Nhon. The men in the trucks were to scream continuously that everything was okay, and Sanis could come back to the base. A short time after I got back to Company B, Sanis came to talk with me. My mind was reeling when Sanis told me that Stringfellow had ordered the raid on Phuket bags of cement. The purpose was to get concrete slabs under our soldiers' barracks and bunkers. Sanis told me that he was the man in charge of requisitioning materials and equipment from the ships unloading in the mile-long pier jutting into the Pacific Ocean, virtually next door to our base in Quy Nhon. Sanis then told me that he could not reveal who and what he was. That was a military secret. Before he found me that afternoon, I'd already heard that everyone called him General and saluted him when Sanis crossed their paths. Sanis then asked me if I wanted to stop being Captain Kobaki's driver and take the job of being his personal bodyguard. The American inside me foolishly said yes. Besides, Kobaki had sold me out. For the next year and 4 months, I rode through hell with Sanis as his personal bodyguard. I was also a member of Sanis' 45-man Quick Reaction Force, which flew and/or rode into places where sensible soldiers had fled from. Mr. Sanis only told me that he had been attached to the National Security Agency ever since he got out of basic training, about 40 years after I left Vietnam. Mr. Sanis explained to me that the man he worked for, Chief Warrant Officer 4 Antuna, was a Navajo Indian code talker since right after Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941. Mr. Sanis said that Mr. Antuna had been attached to the NSA since the day it was created by a top-secret order of President Truman. Mr. Sanis had told me that Mr. Antuna was NSA's chief of station for over one half of the country of South Vietnam since the day he arrived in Quy Nhon. Mr. Sandus told me that he was the NSA Deputy Chief of Station for the 40,000 square miles of the total acreage, total square miles of South Vietnam. Within days of becoming Mr. Sandus's personal bodyguard, I did know he was responsible for the safety of over 40 communication centers across the middle half of South Vietnam. Stress in combat events that I can still recall. By Arthur Bellman Osborne. A rescue of Sergeant Major Alvin Bunch from an angry mob of hundreds of Vietnamese civilians who were intent upon killing him because Bunch had thrown a bucket of water at a woman we called the little old lady with her dud sewn up. Bunch had intervened to stop this Viet Cong tortured soul from using a machete on an old woman who was selling fish. This was a horror show. The armed robber had been released from Viet Cong prisoner, but one of our U.S. Army's, the old armed robber had been released from a Viet Cong prison, but not one of our U.S. Army doctors had cut the twine that sewed her together from front to back. I never saw U.S. Army doctors, or any other American doctors, treat even one Vietnamese civilian for anything. That's not the way to run a war. That's not the way to win the hearts and minds of the indigenous people anywhere on earth. By the way, those are my ads. B. I was coming down from the top of Vung Chua Mountain, where Mr. Sandus was inspecting the U.S. Army security unit's work, which was to guard the security of the largest array of communications towers in South Vietnam. I was with Sandus, our driver, SP4E4 Arthur W. Trangmar, phone number 1-864-338-8156 in South Carolina, closed bearing. When from about 4,000 feet up the mountain, we saw 3 Vietnamese men, bearing rifles, running away from the Quy Nhon leper colony. Our quick reaction force used to have barbecue and beer parties there, when Sandus could trade for steaks on board of freighters lined up at the mile-long pier. Trangmar, Sandus, and I screamed minutes later when we saw Phantom fighter bombers from the Phu Cat Air Base bomb and strafe the leper colony. The Vietnamese leper colony had been safe for over 300 years. The Phantoms blew the hell out of the lepers in the leper colony as we stopped, screamed, and stared. We never went there again. It was no longer a party place. C. For over a year, I saw a crazy naked man wandering the, quote, streets, close quote, of South Vietnam, beating his bloody, filthy chest with a rock in each hand. He also was an escapee from the Viet Cong. Then, finally, he was dead. D. One night, under typhoon conditions, I was ordered by Mr. Antuna to wake up Sandus and bring him to the United States Army Quy Nhon Communications Center, which was the third largest classified communications center in Vietnam. From the panic in Mr. Antuna's movements and voice, I was crying when I got to Sandus's bunker and woke him up. Sandus dressed and ran barefoot to the commo center. When Mr. Sandus came out of the communications center bunker, we ran together to the bunker that housed the 45-man quick reaction force. There, Mr. Sandus shouted to everyone to wake up. When everyone was standing at attention, Sandus barked out that he needed 3 volunteers for a suicide mission. Almost all of the men volunteered. Sandus checked the gear of 3 volunteers, and Sandus, Trangmar, and 3 quick reaction force soldiers and I boarded a couple of jeeps and drove to the adjoining air base. 2 Huey helicopters and their 5-man volunteer crews awaited us. Mr. Sandus briefed us all. We were headed in this typhoon to the base of the 22nd Army of the Republic of South Vietnam, Division Headquarters. This is the headquarters of an infantry division. When we got there, the 6 of us would rappel down ropes, try to find the Angry 26 Communications Center, and use our PRC-6 satellite phones to report back to Mr. Antuna. if the Angry 26 Communication Center, its cryptographic equipment, and codes have been destroyed by the incendiary and high explosive bombs set by Mr. Sanus. Sanus briefed us that one of us would have to survive long enough to make such a report, or B-47 and B-52 bombers would have to assume that at least one of our KW-35 cryptographic code machines have been captured intact, and thus carpet bomb the entire base housing the 22nd Urban Infantry Division. All there would have to die to protect our codes. As I recall, our helicopter gunships were about 8 minutes out from our target when one of the 6 cryptographic code equipment operators called from his spider hole and reported a complete destruction of the Angry 26 Air Mobile Communication Center. I can only hope that my 2 children are pleased about this. Neither Sanus nor I had rappelled down a rope from a gunship under fire in a typhoon, nor did the 4 other volunteer soldiers. The 2 Huey helicopter crews did not have to be killed. Virtually every day of the 485 days that I served as Mr. Sanus' personal bodyguard, we flew to and from an approximate 47 communication centers in the approximately 40,000 square miles of 1 and 2 Corps tactical zones of central South Vietnam. Sanus had to bring new codes to every such communication center every month. Sanus also carried cryptographic code machines to such communication centers on a regular basis. We regularly flew to communication centers in Nha Trang, Khe Sanh, Pleiku, Cam Ranh Bay, Phu Cat, Vung Chau, Korean Tiger Division Mang Ho Camp, Korean Marketing Island, Tui Wa, An Khe, Phu Yen, Yung Tao, Dak To, Hon Tree Island, Phan Rang, and many other bases. The vast majority of our flights that I took with Mr. Sanus were on Huey helicopter gunships that Sanus arranged for the officers of the 92nd Airborne Battalion in Quy Nhon to take the places of the gunners. The gunners never had top secret security clearances. But he and I replaced the door gunners and their machine guns. Many times we dodged incoming fire and returned suppressive fire on enemy soldiers. On one flight on a fixed-wing aircraft, 8 small windows created in about 2 seconds by enemy fire got our attention. On countless helicopter flights, we minimized enemy fire by flying just above the ground. Triggering 47 communication centers to visit once a month for at least, that adds up to 94 missions a month, times 16, a minimum of 1,054 flight missions in our 16 months together. In Jeeps and 3/4 ton trucks, Sanus and I traveled outside of American lines a minimum of 96 times to Vung Chau Mountain, the Mang Ho base of the Korean Tiger Division, and the Korean White Horse Division. Sanus wore a thermite firebomb vest, overlain with stitched pockets holding 32 each clips, containing 20 each 7.62 millimeter rounds. Sanus always carried homemade C4 high explosive bombs when he carried cryptographic code machines. I rode, flew, and/or fought next to him.
Call from Sellers J.
I'll have to call you back. I'm filming. I rode, sat, flew, and fought next to him. So what was my problem? F. On one trip from Company B to Mang Ho Camp of the Korean Tiger Division, we lived through a virtual nightmare. Mr. Sandus had to go visit the base. Monsoon rains prevented us from flying, so we drove in a sheet lightning sky. Monsoon rain. Flooded. Monsoon rain. Thunderstorm world. We were driving on a bulldozed path that separated the jungle from the flooded rice paddies in an area of a floodplain. The path was slippery with mud, yet we barreled along as Strangmar balanced speed in wrecking the 3/4-ton truck. The path was bordered on the jungle side by a fringe of white and young bamboo. It curved so much that at any given point one could see only 20 to 50 feet in front of our truck. There was a complete thunderstorm going on, by the way. So we were all three aware that we were deep in Indian country, and we're on our own until the monsoon storm abated. I'll try that again. We were all totally aware that we were deep into Indian country, and we were all on our own until the monsoon rains abated. Sandus was manning an M60 machine gun. I have a combination automatic rifle / grenade launcher, and Trangmar was driving with one hand and holding an M14 in the other hand. Only Sandus knew why we couldn't wait for the monsoon to pass. The Tiger Division codes would have expired at 4 p.m. Suddenly, we rounded a corner and saw about 16 double-file bikes ridden by North Vietnamese troops heading toward us on the same bulldoze path. Sandus screamed, "No!" and so we did not open fire. Trangmar kept his foot on the gas, and shocked North Vietnamese Army troops all dived to their right into the elephant grass. More NVA, and thus this nightmare continued. Sandus said there were about 130 rows of this 2-bike-wide line of North Vietnamese troops. And the Vietnamese troops had Kalashnikov automatic rifles across their shoulders and both hands on the handlebars of their bikes. If we had opened fire, I would not be recounting this incident. The NVA bike column had us outnumbered 260 to 3. Without another incident, we got to the Mang Ho camp of the Korean Tiger Division. Sandus went into the communications center, did his thing, and when we drove back to Quy Nhon, Company B, we were in a nightmare world, but otherwise there was no incident. At least once a month, Sandus and I had to go to Mang Ho headquarters of the Korean Tiger Division. We either went there by Huey helicopter or Trangmar drove us. Depending on the weather, the trail from Company B to Mang Ho in the valley regularly sported VC or North Vietnamese Army heads mounted on sticks. Mang Ho camp always had suspected Viet Cong soldiers as Korean prisoners, walking, all holding hands in a nightmare circle. It was always a nightmare formation inside the steel post and concertina wire fence. Why? Because if a sick, wounded, or tortured Viet Cong prisoner could no longer hold the hand of the prisoner on each side of him, a prison guard would open fire, and surviving soldiers had to hold hands in another circle that included the freshly killed or wounded Viet Cong prisoners. The VC prisoners could not even drop hands while groveling for food in a trough on the ground. There's a few samples of camping fun in Vietnam. On another trip through the same valley, we ran into an enemy ambush on 60 to 80 or so American soldiers. They were all pinned down in a stinking rice paddy, which was on a floodplain of a small river that ran in monsoon seasons. The line of rice paddies ran along the 2-lane road that the U.S. Army had graded next to the area of elephant grass and bamboo which bordered the jungle. The jungle was perhaps 100 to 150 feet away from the rice paddy where American soldiers were pinned down. Mr. Sandus uses PRC-6 satellite radio to call in bombers. A small fixed-wing spotter plane coordinated a bombing attack on a jungle concealing the Viet Cong or North Vietnamese Army soldiers ambushing us. Within minutes of Sandus's conversation with the spotter plane, 2 Phantom fighter bombers from Phuket Air Base screamed up the valley towards us. Like a crazy person, Sandus stood up as the first fighter bomber dived down to near ground level, right over our heads. Sandus waved his arms as the first Phantom pilot. The second bomber flew directly into the jungle where we were taking fire from. When a bomb went off, you could see or hear it from the jungle. After a while, and after Sandus had emptied his shorts, we drove to our destination and went back to Company B. The event rattled the hell out of all of us. 16 months of hanging out with Mr. Sandus was certainly an adventure. We spent over 80% of our time outside of American lines. And over 80% of our time night and day for 16 months. I was barely 18 years old and had rarely had a bottle of beer when I went to Vietnam. By the time I was discharged from the U.S. Army, I was an alcoholic. I'm still an active alcoholic. I scare myself. I never have picked up a gun since I left Vietnam. I know picking up a gun is something I cannot do. That's pretty much the story for a lot of other pages in the life of the three of us. But the Army, until very recently, said that I was a cryptographic equipment operator in a safe location, big communication center in Quy Nhon. Well, that's because they didn't believe me when I told them, and they didn't immediately. It took them, I don't know, about 14 years. Smart guy. Say, okay, well, let me, you may be right, let me file this. The others are all just different incidents, and they'll all be published. And can be read by anybody who has that much interest. But for me, it's been a long time since I filed for aid after devastating strokes, 4 of them, over a 3-day period in November 1996. The results of 2 strokes caused by rifle-mounted bayonets a lot of years earlier. And the VA, I can tell you, got my report when they thought I was dying, not the VA, but emergency room nurse at the VA hospital in Los Angeles. And she filed my papers, had me write them out. She wrote out most of the stuff. Told her what was what. She sent that in. And it's been a long time since August 12th, 1996. And the VA has still not given me the money it owes me from that date, per the law. But they never meant to give it to me or not give it to me. I was simply a veteran with combat wounds, with combat brain damage. Not just occasional bad dream, but damaged areas of my brain. And they saw them on CAT scans, MRIs, PET scans. A lot of people have seen them. The people I go to now for medical care are Cedars-Sinai Hospital, because they treat me as a human being. The VA did not. I was just next. And people were different every time. I never had a doctor assigned to me. The entire time I've been to the VA, which was right after the strokes and that same problem I was having when I mentioned my first visit to the VA, which was actually a medication problem that caused me to be dying. But the nurse corrected it and kept me warm until I came back. And I've lived. But the VA does not know my name. They do not give a damn who I am, what I did for my country. And to me, it's incredibly important. Because I know I was one damn amazing soldier. Because of sheer grit and sheer patriotism. And the VA does not give a damn. They have deliberately underfunded Veterans Claims Department all across America. Totally, deliberately underfunded it. Who's done it? The Republicans. But have they done it alone? Hell no. Democrats say one thing about veterans and do another to save the money from dealing with it. We're doing the same thing now and we'll continue to. That's why we have veterans committing suicide. They just can't stand the pain of the things that they've been forced to do for our country. They can't stand the fact that if they tell doctors in the VA, the doctors don't give a damn. It's like, well, hey, file your paperwork. There are no people to help us file the paperwork. I had 2 traumatic brain injuries, and I also had 4 strokes when the VA first saw me in '96. I knew I was damaged when I came back in 1968. But I didn't complain to the VA. I didn't look for a check. I took my pain and suffering until 1996. That's a long time. February 68, November 96. But I did it because I knew and felt that other veterans needed help worse than me. But of course it wasn't true. It's just that I was able to do stuff and work anyway. Do I resent what I did for the American people? Not at all. I would go again. In fact, as stupid as it is, when we went into Iraq many years ago, I volunteered. Because I knew I had skills in combat. Old, broken down, stroked out, morbidly obese, heart problems, lung problems, liver problems, every kind of problem you could have, I've got it just about. But I was willing to go. Because I'm an American patriot. Not by word, but by deed. I'm not like the bitches and sons of bitches in the United States Senate, House of Representatives who give lip service. And then, as in the February vote this year, every single senator in the Republican Party voted against increased medical for veterans of the armed services of this country, who needed every single veteran's representatives voted against him or her. Every single one of them. They voted against it. And now, suddenly a deal is made after the Republicans thought, well, we'll embarrass the president and the White House and the Democrats. We'll embarrass them. But they, in February of this year, voted unanimously, including this incredible blowhard, John McCain, about how they're there helping veterans. Hell, they weren't helping veterans, and they're not helping veterans, and they never will. The American people would have to actually stand up for the veterans that are wounded and damaged, or we'll never get anything better for us. And hey, I can't have very long to live. But there are lots of veterans who aren't as bad off as I am. And they could live a lot of healthy years, as badly damaged they've been from constant redeployments into combat zones. But they'll never be treated fairly, because the Americans lose touch after a while. Different issue can be on the table for a few days and then it's gone. The Bernie Sanders, specifically Senator Bernie Sanders, and Senator John McCain made a quick deal. And that is $11 billion more for veterans with damage for the next 3 years. That's $11 billion a year. 1,200,000 honorably discharged veterans in the United States. And so, if you give them the opportunity to split $11 billion divided by 20,200,000, you'll find it's not too many dollars. You'll find it's a fraud. To keep the budget down, to keep the taxes down for the 1% of the 1%. The Romneys and the other bitches who were cowards and traitors. Like our former vice president, who was the worst traitor of all in the United States, and should be brought to trial, should have a fair trial, fair appeals, and should be executed. His heart should be ripped right out of his chest. That would be justice for Dick Cheney, which is the proper pronunciation of his name. Cheney, with his 5 deferments that kept him out of Vietnam. And that wonderfully great American who cheated on his taxes unbelievably and made a fortune in the hundreds of millions of dollars. He's a Mormon. Because he represented himself as a Mormon minister, he was completely deferred from service in Vietnam. And he's lost each of his attempts to become president of the United States. But because people can figure out he's a phony. That's it for right now. I hurt too damn much to speak. Almost 49 years ago, at the start of what looked like it was going to be a nightmare firefight, toe completely severed it from my left foot in a gunfight. But I'm not afraid. I'm not sorry I served my country. I've done my best since then to make up for my incredible career of homicides in Vietnam. You'll know about it if you're under 50 or 60 years old. You'll know about it. You'll know what I did. It's all out there on the internet, short form. Just Google my name and you can find over 50 billion views of my work on that internet. Thank you. I don't know how to turn this off. My son is copying papers for me. And I can barely stand up, so bear with me.